What would it be like to be a wellness advocate? You know, somebody who's keyed in on helping others with physical and mental wellness issues. Well, that's kind of what I have in store for you today by way of this great guest. His name is Mathew Blades, and he helps people in just those ways. However, his side story is really quite compelling as well, and it's part of the reason why I want to share this video with you. Is that Mathew himself has not always been within this space. Rather, he was running this really successful career within broadcast journalism. It was something he'd always dreamt of doing, and he took it right to the maximum level. He was widely respected in the industry, things were going great, everything was tip-top. Until it kind of wasn't. And Mathew shares a story about what unfolded. You know, what happened? How did he lose the fire? How did he lose touch with what he was doing in his life, professionally and personally speaking? And more importantly, how he pulled himself out of all of this. A ton of lessons are going to be learned within this video. And as always, I do encourage you to check out the full-length audio version. I mean, there's just so much that I can jam within that as opposed to these shorter videos. But I've probably spoken a little bit too much already, so I think it's about time to get into this video. So why don't we? All right, well, I do want to get things started here with Mathew kind of laying things out and explaining a little bit more of his backstory and what transpired and what happened.
And that is the very definition of what happened. I think, like so many people, Chris, it's like you go like hell until something happens. And that's it, right? You run until you hit the brick wall, and there's no real telling when it's going to come up. But, for me, I was lucky enough to be in my career for what I'll call 25 amazing years. I ultimately, I stayed in it 2 years too long, probably, but that's okay. I had a blessed and charmed life. I did things that not a single member of my family had ever done before. And so all good, but it did come to a crossroads at some point, and I'm sure we're going to get into this today, where I had to make a decision to lean into taking care of myself.
Yeah. I think that's a point that like a lot of people grapple with at different points across their careers or lives, like things are working for you in one particular moment of your life. And then just the contextual factors change, or you as a person change. You grow into careers, you grow out of careers, like these things happen, right? And it's kind of what you do with it afterwards. I mean, some people struggle on and, like maybe to the detriment of their health and well-being, while others make these big pivots and recognize that some of these warning signs are flashing for a reason. And it's probably best to examine them and find out the reasons why.
Yeah, I hope that last clip kind of gave you that overarching context to all of this in this conversation. But this next one coming up, I want to dive into the details. So here's Mathew explaining a little bit more about kind of what went down for him, what transpired.
To go back to 2021 and walking away from the career, you have to back up a little bit further than that. And probably starting at around 2017, when I, like so many people, started to, really for me, it started with back pain. Essentially, it was like I was working out at a gym 5 days a week, running every single day, feeling incredible. And then all of a sudden, like hips, back, and gosh, it didn't feel good, and I could never get it straight. And I would go to the chiros and do all the things. I would go to the doctor, and they'd be like, "Man, nothing's really wrong here." And so you just kind of keep banging it out and going as hard as you can, and then eventually, like, that takes its toll. So we'll get there in just a second, but I think you have to back up to that, because that's kind of when it started, and that's when, as a man, especially if we're just playing on stereotypes here, we don't do a really good job. When pain shows up for most men, there's this idea that I'm fine. There's this idea that, I'll take a couple of pills and I'll work around it. I'll manage it. Yeah. And here's the thing, man, that works till it doesn't, right? That works till it doesn't. And so as we progress into 2021, I'm not well. I've completely, because of my back pain and all the things that were going on at work, and then in just my personal life, and I just had kind of stopped taking care of myself, honestly.
Yeah.
I was a total work zombie, dude. Like I
Yeah.
woke up in the morning, I went to work. I'd been doing that job so long, I could do it in my sleep.
Yeah.
Then I would go home, probably self-medicate for a few hours and, make myself feel better. Then maybe do something with the kids, that evening. And I just rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. And it was so boring and so mundane. And I'd really lost touch with anything that was meaningful to me. And I remember driving home from work one day, man, and I was in a pretty dark place by this stage of the game, but
Mm.
because this is kind of prior to deciding to quit, and this thought comes in my head, dude. It was like, you're never gonna be happy again. Like
Mm.
that's honestly what I thought. I thought I was like,
Wow. Wow.
but then here's what's really scary is that I started to make peace with that over the next few months, right? Which
Yeah.
took me even further down because I had sort
Yeah.
of gotten to this point where I was like, you don't worry about it. Happiness does not need to be a part of the equation anymore. Now you just have to live for other people and do something different, which is terrible
Yeah.
advice for anybody listening. And so I just got to that point, man, where it was so dark, it was so awful that my body eventually started to speak up again. And this is where I want every man listening to this to perk up.
Yeah.
Your body will tell you when something's going on, and you got to do a good job of listening to it. So the story for me, Chris, is that I get shingles. Then I start getting these panic attacks, these nocturnal panic attacks, which means they happen in the dead of the night, in the middle of the night, and you just kind of wake up at 2 a.m. with, what feels like a heart attack. And after the third one of those, dude, I was in the hospital. And when the doctors again came back in, they said, there's nothing physically wrong with you.
Mm.
So I know in this moment, because I'm self-aware enough to understand what's up here, that like it's mental,
Yeah.
it's spiritual,
Yeah.
maybe it's both, dude. But like I know I have to get to work, and so that's kind of how we get to.
Yeah.
It's time to divorce the career.
Now, as heartbreaking as that was to hear the details of Matthew's struggles there, I think it was also quite helpful in the sense that it's representative of an experience that a lot of people probably go through or could be going through if they're not careful. But what I also like about Matthew's story is the redemption to it all, how he pulled himself out of it. And that's kind of what this next clip is all about. So here's Matthew explaining that side of the story.
Like moving on from that moment, like what were some of the things that you did to pull yourself out of that, to get yourself right, to find
Yeah.
fulfillment, to find purpose?
The first thing I did was I made a very large investment in me. And I mean, like I put myself into a spiritual and mental health retreat. So, I joke about it now. I say, listen, we reached into our savings account because I had to save my life. And that's how it felt then. So that was step one. I found an incredible mental health and spiritual retreat in Sedona, Arizona. And I worked with 12 different angels, if you want, over the course of 5 days, and had ceremony, therapy, sound healings, tons of these incredible modalities and moments. And it was in those 5 days that I had a light turned on. I fully, for the first time in my life, understood kind of what is this all about. And then I went home and quit my job and got to work on those things. So that was the first part, was like I invested in myself and I sought the help that I needed.
Yeah, I really like that simple yet profound statement Matthew made. He sought help for himself. He took care of himself. And as he said, that was step one. But what do you do next? You understand that the professional side was causing a lot of this stress. So how do you go about navigating a new professional career? Well, that is what this next clip is all about. So check it out.
On the professional side of things, quitting the job is certainly a big moment for anyone, especially
Yeah.
spending that much time and devoting your career and having professional expertise within that space. There's a certain fear factor, of course, like moving on from that, despite knowing that, it's probably the best thing for you at that point. Did you have an idea of what you're going to sink yourself into again within the professional sphere at that moment? Or was it just like, I need to get out of this and take some time and then figure it out?
Yeah, no, I knew in the middle of my retreat, man. I vividly remember late Saturday night. It was my second day in, and I was back at my where I was sleeping, and I was like, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to quit my job, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell everybody what I learned here for the rest of my life, and I'm gonna make sure that that there's not somebody out there who is like, because here's what I joke about this now, but like I really believe this. We're all a small sequence away of some language, of some words, of some word choice away from it all making sense. And you know, it's like, and here's how, and like maybe your wife will say something to you. She'll say it again, and you'll ignore it. But then like somebody at work says it, and you're like, that's the greatest thing ever. And all they did was say the same thing the other person did, right? But you heard the sequence of words differently, and it touched you. And that happened to me. And it was so flippin' profound, Chris, that I was like, why would I not think this would work for somebody else? Now, take every ounce of broadcasting ability that you have, and in the world of podcasts, in the world of motivational speaking, in the world of like, you know, all the things that are happening with YouTube, use it in that way. And just so keep doing what you're doing, but use a totally different sequence of words.
Yeah. No, got it.
That's essentially what I do.
Yeah, I really like the sentiment in that last clip there. I mean, life itself sends us down some pretty windy paths, some ups, some downs. There are challenges all the way through. But it's what you do in these moments, right? If you take the time, if you're considerate and careful enough to reflect on who you are, what your skills and abilities are, I mean, there's always a pathway forward. There always is. And Mathew's story perfectly encapsulates this sort of feeling or sentiment. But I do want to shift on over into what Mathew's doing right now. You know, how is he paying the bills? How does he make a living off of this new professional career and endeavor? So here's a clip of Mathew explaining that.
Podcasting is probably, if everybody's got their buckets and whatever, that's probably my biggest bucket is podcasting. And so when I'm not on Chris's podcast, I'm doing my own called Learn from People Who Lived It. And that one was birthed from my retreat. I knew in the moment, like me in therapy and talking through a lot of these things and having these spiritual experiences was just so profound for me. I thought I need to use my skills as an interviewer and help people share their stories so that they can feel the freedom of like getting it off their chest. Like you don't have to hold on to that any longer. Like set that down. Let's put it out there and like just be free with the whole thing, right? So that's where Learn from People Who Lived It started. And then I'm on another podcast called I Needed That. And that one is with my friend Chris Powell. And that one is pretty much about, transformation, kind of this mental and physical fitness, if you will. Okay. And then I'm helping other people with their podcasts, just to go back to, you know, using that skill set from radio and television and helping people from the ground up or level up or whatever that is. But kind of these complete consult. That's how I pay the bills right now, right? That complete consultant services.
Now, there is one more element to Mathew's work that I want to share with you. I allow him to share. But there's also another thing I want you to pick up on in this next clip is how does Mathew deliver this message? How does he deliver the information that he's putting across to you? Listen really carefully to that.
And then I'm speaking, which is probably my favorite thing to do in the world, because for years I sat in a studio in a box and I could never see the person listening to me. And now when I go out and I talk, I see the people looking at me. And it's like, it's amazing. It's magical. I freaking love it.
All right. What did you pick up from that last clip, aside from the information that he conveyed? Well, to me, that is exactly what someone sounds like when they have passion, when they have a purpose, when they have a mission in life, and they are so enthused about it. And one thing I do want to draw attention to within this entire video clip, we have not spoken about money, right? That's certainly a big element to what anyone does within their professional lives or businesses, but it is not the big thing. It is not the driving force. If you don't have this element of passion in your career, in your business, I truly believe you're going to be missing out on life and really getting the most out of it. Anyway, I do want to transition to a last clip here that I want to present to you. And this one is centered on some advice, some career advice that Mathew gives to young people. And as somebody who runs a podcast centered on these issues, I'd have to second what Mathew's saying here. I think some really useful and insightful looks at careers, especially for young people. So check it out.
You know, the message we should be given, that I give my young boys who are 15 and 17 now, but like, find something that you want to go do for like the next 15 to 20 years. Let's just put that mark on it. So, because that gives you enough time to really get in it and get really super successful and have a nice little ride with it, right? And then don't be afraid to pivot and go find something else. I mean, you know, I am one of those rare cases that you just mentioned earlier, right? I remember being 7 years old in my basement, talking up records like I was a radio personality. Boom, I went straight to it. 18 years old, didn't go to college or anything, went straight into the radio business and did it until I was, 47 or 48 or something like that. So I went pew, and then I went choom, and now I'm down here squiggling around, man. And I dig it. I like it. I like it a lot, actually.
Well, I think we are drawing to a close for this video, but if you're liking what you're hearing, go check out the full-length audio version. We get into much, much more. For example, we look at burnout. We look at what you can do. What are some specific techniques or specific options for people that are beginning to experience this? We also have a story where Mathew's talking about how his actual journey into this space caught the attention of none other than Howard Stern. So you're not going to want to miss that story either. And you can find this, of course, wherever you access your podcast. Just search for Life as a ... All right, and one last request here. This is YouTube. I'd really, really appreciate a like or subscribe. It goes a long ways, way more than you can ever know. Anyhow, please tune in for the next episode of Life as a. It'll be coming at you right next week, so don't miss it. All right, we'll see you then.